The Arizona sun was a merciless orb, bleaching the sky and cracking the earth into a mosaic of suffering. For 2 weeks, Ilara Vance and her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, had been walking, their journey an unending tapestry of dust, sweat, and despair. Ilara's husband, a silver prospector, had succumbed to a flash flood, leaving them with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the hollow echo of his last words. Lily, a child of bright laughter and boundless energy, was now a fragile doll, her skin a feverish flush, her breathing a ragged, rattling sound. Ilara carried her when her small legs gave way, their progress a slow, agonizing crawl across the desolate landscape. Hope was a dying ember, flickering in the fierce wind. They were on the verge of collapsing when a speck on the horizon grew into a shape, a structure, a ranch. With a final surge of adrenaline, Ilara staggered toward the distant promise of shelter. As they neared, the details emerged: a sturdy wooden fence, a corral filled with horses, and a large 2-story ranch house. The air, heavy with the scent of dry grass and horse manure, was a welcome change from the sterile emptiness of the desert. A man emerged from the barn, his frame broad and his face weathered by years of sun and silence. He was Caleb Hayes, the owner of the Bar H Ranch. His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, were a mix of caution and weariness. He watched them approach, his hand resting on the hilt of the pistol holstered at his hip. Ilara stumbled to a halt a few yards from him, her voice a raw whisper. "Please, sir. My daughter is sick. We need help." Caleb's gaze fell upon Lily, who was trembling in Ilara's arms, her face a mask of fever and distress. Her eyes, wide and glassy, seemed to stare into an unseen abyss. He took a step back, his face hardening. The air between them, already thick with the dust of the day, now crackled with a new tension. "Stay back from the child," he ordered, his voice low and firm. "The sickness is on her." His words, sharp as a broken shard of glass, shattered the last of Ilara's hope. Her knees buckled, a choked sob escaped her lips as she collapsed into the dust, holding Lily tight. The child, stirring at the sudden movement, let out a pained whimper. The sound was the final straw. Ilara buried her face in Lily's small shoulder, her body racked with silent sobs. The world, for a moment, was nothing but dust and the crushing weight of her grief. Caleb Hayes was a man defined by the ghosts he carried. Years ago, a similar fever had swept through his family, taking his wife and infant son. The memory of their final gasping breaths was a scar etched into his soul, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. He had built his ranch and his life on a foundation of solitude, a fortress against the unpredictable pain of human connection. The sight of the collapsing widow and her sick child was a direct assault on the walls he had so carefully constructed. He stood there, frozen, his mind a battlefield of conflicting impulses. The rancher in him, a man of logic and survival, screamed at him to send them away. To risk a contagion was to risk everything he had built. But a flicker of something deeper, a ghost of the man he once was, rebelled against the cold logic. He saw not just a potential threat, but a reflection of his own past suffering. The pained whimpers from the child were a key, unlocking a door he had long ago sealed shut. He took a deep breath, the dry air burning his lungs. The decision was made. He wouldn't let them die, not here, not on his land. "Jebediah!" he bellowed. A moment later, a grizzled old man with a kind face and a silver moustache emerged from the barn. This was Jeb, his foreman, and a man who had been with him through thick and thin. "Get the cot from the bunkhouse and bring blankets, the good ones," Caleb instructed, his voice gruff. Jeb, with a knowing nod, didn't ask questions. He had seen the look in Caleb's eyes. He knew that beneath the rough exterior was a man of quiet compassion. He disappeared into the bunkhouse, returning a moment later with a simple cot and a pile of soft blankets. Caleb approached Ilara cautiously. "I'm not bringing her into the main house. We have a small cabin a bit away. You can stay there." His voice held no comfort, but his actions spoke louder than any words could. Ilara, lifting her tear-streaked face from her daughter's shoulder, looked at him with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. She didn't have the strength to stand. Caleb, with a grunt of effort, carefully lifted Lily from her arms. The child was burning hot, her small body trembling uncontrollably. "He's a good man, ma'am," Jeb said, helping Ilara to her feet. "He's just got a hard way of showing it." Ilara didn't respond. She simply clung to Jeb's arm, her eyes fixed on Caleb as he carried her daughter towards a small, weathered cabin nestled among a grove of cottonwood trees. A fragile thread of hope, almost imperceptible, began to spin its way back into her heart. The small cabin was rustic, but clean, smelling of dry wood and dust. Inside, a single cot had been set up, a small table with a lamp and a water basin. Caleb laid Lily gently on the cot. Her small hand, hot as a branding iron, gripped his thumb for a moment before her fever-addled mind released it. The gesture, so innocent and trusting, sent a jolt through Caleb. Jeb and Martha, the ranch cook, arrived shortly after. Martha was a stout, quiet woman with hands calloused from years of kneading dough and tending to fires. She carried a steaming bowl of broth and a tin cup of cool water. Her presence was a silent comfort. She didn't speak much, but her actions were a testament to her caring nature. "She's got a fever," Martha said, her voice a low rumble. "Needs to drink. We'll make a poultice from sage and willow bark. That'll help." Ilara watched them, a profound sense of relief washing over her. She sat beside the cot, stroking Lily's forehead, her heart a tangled mess of fear and gratitude. She looked up at Caleb. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't have any way to repay you." "You don't have to," Caleb said, turning away, his face a grim mask. He was already regretting his decision, the old fears gnawing at him. He was a man of the land, not a caregiver. This was uncharted territory, and he felt a deep unease. Jeb, seeing the tension, stepped in. "We'll get you a change of clothes, ma'am. Martha will make you a good meal. You're safe here." The days that followed were a blur of anxious waiting. Lily's fever raged, and her small body was a constant testament to her suffering. Ilara never left her side, holding her, whispering stories of their life before the tragedy. Caleb, a silent shadow, would watch from a distance, his hands often clenching and unclenching at his sides. He would send Jeb or Martha with fresh water, food, and the herbal remedies Martha prepared. One evening, as a dust storm began to brew on the horizon, Ilara was humming a lullaby to a delirious Lily. The tune, a simple, melancholic melody, drifted out of the open cabin door and reached Caleb, who was standing a few yards away, pretending to check a fence post. The song was one his own mother had sung to him. A wave of nostalgia, sharp and painful, washed over him. It was a memory he had suppressed for years, a reminder of a life and a joy that had been stolen from him. He turned abruptly, walking back toward the main house, his boots kicking up clouds of dust. He needed to be alone. He needed to be safe. But the walls of his emotional fortress were beginning to crumble, a single sorrowful melody, the wrecking ball he had never anticipated. As the days turned into a week, Lily's condition remained precarious. Her fever would spike and then recede, a terrifying dance of life and death. Ilara, running on pure will and a diet of Martha's simple, nourishing meals, was a constant vigil at her daughter's side. One afternoon, Jeb found Ilara at the well, her face pale and her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You ought to rest, ma'am," he said, his voice gentle. "She needs you strong." "I can't," Ilara replied, her voice a whisper. "I can't leave her." Jeb nodded, understanding. "I'll watch her for a while. She's strong, that one. She's a fighter." He was right. Lily, despite her frail body, was fighting. The bond between Ilara and the ranch hands grew. Jeb, a man who had seen more than his share of life's hardships, became a source of quiet strength. He would sit with Ilara, telling her stories of his youth, of the long cattle drives, and of his respect for Caleb. "He's not what he seems," Jeb said one evening, as the two of them sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun dip below the mountains. He lost his family, you know. A fever like this. It broke him, made him hard as a nail. But the man who helped me after my horse threw me, the man who brought in a stray calf in a snowstorm, that's the real Caleb Hayes. Ilara listened, the puzzle pieces of Caleb's character slowly fitting together. The cold, distant man she had first met was a shell, a self-defense mechanism, a flicker of sympathy sparked within her. She was a widow. She knew the deep ache of loss. The next day, Lily's fever broke. The change was subtle at first. Her breathing became more even, her skin less flushed. When she finally opened her eyes, they were clear and focused. "Mama," she whispered, her voice reedy and weak. Ilara's relief was a powerful, all-consuming wave. She collapsed against the cot, tears of joy streaming down her face. She held Lily tight, her heart overflowing with a gratitude so immense it was almost painful. Caleb, who had been watching from a distance, saw the scene unfold. A corner of his mouth lifted in a small, almost imperceptible smile. The tension that had held his shoulders in a rigid knot for a week finally began to ease. The child was going to live. The news spread through the ranch like wildfire. Martha made a celebratory meal, and even Caleb joined them on the porch of the main house. The evening air was cool and crisp, a welcome relief from the daytime heat. The mood was one of quiet celebration. The battle had been won, but the war, Ilara knew, was far from over. With Lily on the mend, the dynamics on the ranch shifted. Ilara, now no longer consumed by fear, began to help out with the chores. She was a city girl, but she was a fast learner. She helped Martha with the cooking and Jeb with the mending of tack. She worked tirelessly, her way of repaying the kindness she had been shown. Caleb watched her, a newfound respect for her resilience growing with each passing day. He found himself seeking her out, not for conversation, but just to be in her presence. The silence between them was no longer awkward or tense. It was a comfortable stillness, a shared understanding. One evening, as Ilara was mending a torn canvas tarp, Caleb approached her. "You don't have to do all this, Mrs. Vance," he said. "My name is Ilara," she replied, not looking up from her work, "and I want to. I owe you so much." "You owe me nothing," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "The girl, she has a strong spirit. She gets it from her father," Ilara said, a faint smile on her lips. "He was the strongest man I ever knew." She paused, the smile fading. "He would have done the same for us." Caleb sat down on a nearby crate, the scent of fresh-cut hay filling the air. "I lost my family to a fever," he confessed, the words a raw whisper. "My wife, Sarah, and my boy, Henry. He was just a baby." Ilara's eyes met his, filled with a deep, compassionate understanding. "I'm so sorry," she said, the words a balm for his wounded soul. "I understand." He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of their shared grief. The night air was cool, and the stars were a brilliant, scattered light across the velvet black sky. They sat in a comfortable silence, two broken people, their shared pain a bridge between them. But the peace was short-lived. A few days later, a rider from a neighboring town, Silver Creek, arrived. He was a wiry man with a cruel smile and a menacing glint in his eye. He was a debt collector, and he held a paper signed by Ilara's late husband, a hefty sum owed to a man named Silas Thorne, a notorious saloon owner. "Your husband borrowed against his prospecting claim," the man said, his voice a sneer. "The claim's worth nothing, but the debt's still good. Mr. Thorne says you can pay the debt off, or there are other ways." He looked at Lily, then at Ilara, his gaze lingering with a sinister implication. Caleb, who had been listening from the porch, stepped forward. "Get off my land," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "And you tell Thorne that I'll be the one to deal with this." The debt collector's smile wavered. He knew Caleb Hayes' reputation. He turned his horse and galloped away. Ilara, her face pale, looked at Caleb. She was no longer a guest. She was a liability. The sanctuary of the Bar H Ranch had been breached. The ghost of her past was back, and it was threatening to consume her once more. The incident with the debt collector was a rude awakening. It brought a cold reality to the warm, nascent relationship forming between Ilara and Caleb. Ilara, ashamed and burdened by her husband's secret, felt a deep sense of guilt. Caleb, on the other hand, was furious. His protective instincts had been triggered, but he was also a pragmatic man. This wasn't just a simple act of charity anymore. It was a conflict with a dangerous man, a man who didn't play by the rules. "I should have told you," Ilara said, her voice shaking as she sat across from Caleb in his study. The room was all dark wood and leather, a reflection of the man who inhabited it. "You didn't know," Caleb said, though his voice was still laced with a cool frustration. "Why did he borrow money from a man like Thorn?" "My husband was a good man, but he was always chasing a dream," Ilara explained, her eyes welling with tears. "He believed this silver claim was the one. He needed capital. I told him not to trust that man, but he said we had no other choice. He was desperate to make a better life for us." Caleb ran a hand over his face, the gesture one of exhaustion. "Thorn is a snake. He's been trying to get his hands on land in this valley for years. He won't let this go." "I'll leave," Ilara said, standing up. "I can't put you and your ranch at risk." Caleb looked at her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his stormy eyes. "And go where? What do you think he'll do to you? You and Lily will be at his mercy." He paused, the words hanging in the air. "You're not leaving. I'll handle Thorn." The declaration was both a relief and a new source of anxiety for Ilara. She knew Caleb was a capable man, but she also knew the depths of Thorn's cruelty. Her gratitude warred with her fear. Meanwhile, Jeb, ever the steady hand, was worried. "You know what kind of man Thorn is, Caleb," he said later that evening. "He'll send more than just a debt collector next time." Caleb's jaw was set. "Let him. He won't touch my ranch, and he won't touch them." The tension on the ranch was palpable. The quiet sanctuary was now a fortress preparing for a siege. Ilara saw the way the ranch hands looked at her, a mixture of sympathy and resentment. She was the cause of this trouble. She felt like an unwelcome burden, a constant reminder of the fragility of the peace they had all built. The next morning, Ilara found a small, hand-carved rocking horse on the porch of the cabin. It was a simple, beautiful thing, made of dark, polished wood. Lily, who was now able to walk around, gasped in delight and immediately began to play with it. Ilara's eyes filled with tears. She knew it had to be Caleb. The hardened rancher, the man who had ordered her to stay back, was also the man who had a heart gentle enough to carve a toy for a sick child. The gesture, a silent apology and a promise of protection, was a testament to the complex man he was. The standoff came sooner than expected. A week after the first visit, Silas Thorne himself rode to the Bar H Ranch, his entourage of 3 rough-looking men in tow. He was a large man, with a face that seemed to have been chiseled from stone, and a predatory smile. Caleb met him at the gate, his hand on his pistol, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Thorne," he said, his voice as cold and hard as the desert itself. "Hayes," Thorne replied, his eyes scanning the ranch, a glint of possessiveness in them. "I hear you've taken in a guest of mine, a widow with a debt." "She's my guest, and the debt is not hers," Caleb countered. "You deal with me. The debt is hers. She's his surviving kin. The law is on my side," Thorne sneered. "Unless, of course, you want to pay it for her. I'll accept livestock, say a dozen of your best head of cattle." The demand was outrageous. Thorne was testing him, trying to provoke a fight. Caleb knew that giving in would only show weakness. "That's not going to happen," Caleb said, his voice a low growl. "You and your men can turn around now, or you can find out what it's like to be shot on my land." Thorne's smile vanished. His hand hovered over his own pistol. The air crackled with tension. "You think you can protect them, Hayes? I have friends in high places. "This won't end here." With a final, menacing look, Thorn turned his horse and rode away, his men following in his wake. Ilara, watching from the window of the main house, felt her heart pound against her ribs. She saw the quiet fury in Caleb's posture, the way his shoulders were rigid with tension. She knew he had just put himself in grave danger for her. Later that evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Ilara found Caleb by the corral, his face etched with worry. "Caleb," she said, her voice soft, "why are you doing this?" He turned to her, his eyes unreadable in the fading light. "Your husband's debt is an excuse," he said, the words blunt and to the point. "Thorn wants this land. The debt is just a way to put pressure on me. I won't give him a reason to come back. I'll pay the debt myself." "No," Ilara said, her voice firm. "I won't let you do that. It's my husband's debt, and I'll deal with it." She took a deep breath, her decision made. "I'm going to Silver Creek. I'll talk to him myself." Caleb's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you crazy? He'll do anything to get what he wants. He'll use you. I won't let you go." "You can't stop me," she said, her chin lifted in a defiant gesture. "This is my burden, not yours. You've already done more than enough. You saved my daughter's life. I won't let you lose your ranch because of us." The words, spoken with a quiet strength, hung in the air. Caleb saw the fire in her eyes, a reflection of his own stubborn determination. He realized in that moment that this woman was not the same broken widow who had collapsed in the dust. She was a force of nature, forged in the fires of grief and survival. And in his own way, he was falling in love with her. The journey to Silver Creek was fraught with tension. Ilara, Jeb, and Caleb rode together, the silence between them thick with unspoken anxieties. Ilara was determined, but inside she was terrified. Silver Creek was a town built on vice and greed, and Silas Thorn was its king. As they rode, Caleb and Ilara shared stories, not of their pasts, but of their present fears and hopes. She told him about her dreams for a new life, a life where she could raise Lily in safety and peace. He spoke of the land, of his deep connection to the ranch, and of the quiet joy of a life lived in harmony with the rhythm of the seasons. They spoke of their pasts, too. Ilara told Caleb of her life as a seamstress in the city, of her love for her husband, and of his grand, but ultimately fatal dreams. Caleb, in turn, told her more about his late wife, Sarah, a woman who had taught him the meaning of home and the true value of human connection. The journey was a bridge, closing the last remaining gaps between them. When they arrived in Silver Creek, the town was exactly as Ilara had imagined it, dusty, loud, and filled with a sense of lawless abandon. The saloon, Thorn's headquarters, was a sprawling two-story building, its swinging doors a constant motion of men and noise. "I'll go in alone," Ilara said, her hand gripping the reins of her horse, her knuckles white. "Absolutely not," Caleb said, his voice firm. "We go in together." Inside, the saloon was a smoke-filled hive of activity. The air was thick with the scent of whiskey, sweat, and sawdust. Thorn was seated at a corner table, a glass of whiskey in his hand, a smug look on his face. He saw them enter, and a cruel smile spread across his lips. "Well, well, look what the cat dragged in," he said, his voice a low growl. "The widow and her protector." "I'm here to settle my husband's debt," Ilara said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sure you are, little lady," Thorn said, his eyes a cold, calculating glint. "But the price has gone up. It's now the deed to his prospecting claim, and a third of all future profits from the Bar H Ranch." Caleb took a step forward, his hand moving towards his pistol. "You're out of your mind, Thorn." "Am I?" Thorn sneered. "You think you can just come into my town, make a fool of me in front of my men, and get away with it? That debt is a rope around her neck, and I'm going to pull it until you give me what I want." Just then, a man at the bar, a tall, lanky man with a scarred face, turned around. He was the debt collector, but his demeanor had changed. He looked at Thorn with a mix of fear and hatred. "You're a liar, Thorn," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "You told me the claim was worthless. You said it was just a piece of paper to get a hold on her husband." He turned to Ilara. "Your husband showed me a map. There's a rich vein of silver on that claim. Thorn knew it all along. He was just waiting for your husband to die to get his hands on it." Thorn's face went pale with fury. "Shut your mouth, you idiot!" he bellowed. The revelation was a bombshell. Ilara, Caleb, and the entire saloon were stunned. The debt wasn't about money, it was about the silver. Thorn's deception was now out in the open. The quiet man at the bar, the debt collector, had just given them an unexpected weapon. The revelation of Thorn's deception changed everything. The saloon, which had been a haven of silent support for Thorn, now buzzed with a murmuring discontent. His men, who had been loyal only to his money and his power, saw him for the liar he was. Caleb seized the opportunity. "Thorn is a thief and a fraud," he declared, his voice ringing through the saloon. "He lied to a good man, drove him to his death, and now he's trying to steal a widow's last possession. Do any of you support a man like that?" The question hung in the air. One by one, Thorn's men began to back away. The quiet debt collector, his name was Jed, stepped forward, his eyes filled with a newfound courage. "The map is real, sir," he said to Caleb. "The vein is there. He showed me. It's a huge claim." Thorn, seeing his power base crumbling, lunged at Jed. "I'll kill you, you traitor!" But before he could reach him, Caleb drew his pistol and a shot rang out, not aimed at Thorn, but at a bottle of whiskey behind him, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. "You won't touch him," Caleb said, his voice like the crack of a whip. "You're done, Thorn. You're finished." Thorn, his face a mask of rage and defeat, looked around the saloon. He was alone. The men he had bought with money had turned their backs on him. The man he had scorned had revealed his secret. The rancher he had underestimated had outplayed him. He turned and stormed out of the saloon, a defeated man. The town, for the first time in a long time, was silent. Ilara, trembling, looked at Caleb. He was a man of his word. He had protected her, and in doing so he had dismantled a powerful enemy. Jed, the debt collector, approached them. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said to Ilara. "I didn't know the full story. I was just doing my job. He threatened my family." "I understand," Ilara said, a deep sense of compassion in her voice. "You did the right thing today. You helped us. Thank you." Jed nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, and walked away. The ride back to the ranch was a new kind of silence, one of profound relief and a burgeoning hope. As they rode, Caleb's hand reached out and took Ilara's. Her hand was small and warm in his. They rode on, their hands intertwined, a silent promise between them. The sun, a warm golden globe, began to set, casting long, peaceful shadows across the land. The storm had passed. Back at the ranch, life resumed its tranquil pace, but everything had changed. The ranch, once a fortress of solitude, was now a home. Lily, fully recovered, was a whirlwind of energy and laughter, her presence a constant reminder of the life and joy that had been brought back to the Bar H. Ilara and Caleb's relationship deepened, their days filled with shared work and quiet moments of understanding. She taught him to mend clothes and to make a simple but delicious pie. He taught her how to ride a horse and how to mend a fence. They were two halves of a whole, each one filling a void in the other. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Lily chase a stray chicken, Caleb turned to Ilara, his eyes, so often stormy, now filled with a clear, steady light. "Ilara," he said, his voice low and earnest, "I want you to stay, not as a guest, not as a woman with a debt, but as a partner, as my family." Ilara's heart fluttered. She had been waiting for these words, but hearing them spoken out loud was a different kind of magic. "Caleb," she said, her voice thick with emotion, I want that more than anything." He reached out and took her hand, his thumb stroking her palm. "I was so afraid of loving again. I was so afraid of losing again. You and Lily, you've taught me that love isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength." Ilara, with tears streaming down her face, leaned into him. "And you, Caleb Hayes," she said, a soft smile on her lips. "You taught me that a home isn't just a place. It's a person. It's where you are." They sat in the quiet embrace, the sound of crickets and the rustling leaves of the cottonwood trees the only witnesses to their quiet declaration. The journey of two broken hearts had led them to this moment, a moment of profound peace and promise. The ranch, once a sanctuary from the world, was now a place where a new family would be built, a place where the dust of the past could finally settle, and where a new chapter of life, love, and community could begin. The darkness of the past had given way to the light of a new dawn, a testament to the fact that even in the harsh, unforgiving world of the Old West, a heart could find its way home.